Muito obrigado. Welcome back. Now we have the first panel assembled, which includes Professor Médio hailing from University of Paris 8, Coronel Nuno Lemos Pires from the Military Academy. They will discuss the issues related to the Islamist movements, namely ideology, strategies and objectives. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Ricardo Alexandre from RTP. Thank you very much.
Muito bom dia, muito obrigado ao Instituto de Defesa Nacional e ao Sr. General Vítor Viana pelo convite para moderar este painel neste seminário sobre um tema que é crucial no nosso tempo, pelos motivos conhecidos, pela importância que determinados movimentos foram ganhando no espaço público, se quisermos, e na forma como têm, desgraçadamente, se me é permitida a expressão, interferido nas nossas vidas. Como estas coisas, e no jornalismo damos muita importância a critérios de proximidade, seja proximidade geográfica, seja proximidade simbólica. E é óbvio que quando um compatriota nosso morre de forma violenta num contexto que está relacionado com estes movimentos, este tema ganha naturalmente uma importância acrescida. Não vou perder muito mais tempo com introduções. A sessão vai decorrer em inglês, mas vou fazer a apresentação em português dos dois membros do painel. Médio é professor na Universidade de Paris 8, onde é diretor do Departamento de Estudos Árabes. Leciona sobre Médio Oriente e estudos islâmicos relacionados com radicalização e terrorismo. Entre as suas mais recentes publicações estão já este ano A Guerra dos Islamismos, está aqui, e também o Atlas do Terrorismo Islamita, que é um livro que, pelo que percebi, é atualizado periodicamente, semestralmente, até pela questão dos mapas que tem. Portanto, há edições regulares a nível escrito e é atualizado também eletronicamente. O Médio publicou também no ano passado O Regresso do Califado. Pelo que já pude perceber em conversa prévia que tivemos, fala tudo quanto é línguas árabes, desde Urdu a Farsi, Pashtun, etc. É professor associado de árabe e o primeiro em provas de agregação, que é o nível de exigência mais elevado no sistema educacional francês. Foi diretor do Laboratório de Análise de Informação Estratégica e Vigilância Eletrónica. Foi professor também, para além das universidades em Paris, foi professor também em Toulouse e em Genebra. Nuno Lemos Pires, coronel, é professor na Academia Militar, professor convidado também no ISCTE, na Universidade Nova, aqui no Instituto de Defesa Nacional. Tem um doutoramento em História, Defesa e Relações Internacionais. Foi assistente militar do comandante da NATO no Comando Conjunto em Lisboa. Foi comandante do 2º Batalhão de Infantaria Mecanizada. Participou em missões em Moçambique, Angola, Paquistão, Etiópia e Afeganistão. Tem 8 livros publicados, além de cerca de uma centena de artigos e capítulos em livros. Vamos então começar e dou a palavra ao professor Médio Guider. Médio Guider, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here and honored. I would like to thank the National Defense Institute for his invitation. And I'm so sorry not to make my presentation in Portuguese. Indeed, I speak a lot of languages, but not Portuguese, and I'm unable to do it in Portuguese. I can do it in Arabic if you want. If some people speak Arabic here, I can do it in French. My presentation will be to explain my last position. I'm still professor at the university and leading the Department of Arabic and Islamic Studies. But my last position was the senior expert for the European Commission on countering violent extremism in the Middle East and North Africa. So what I'm presenting today is the results of the study that began in 2014 and that finished in 2016. The question that have been asked to my team was, what was the impact of the Islamic State the organization of the Islamic State on the Muslim world. What was it the impact? What is the state of the today of the Islamic world? So our methodology to do this study, I would like, before to explain the differences, for me it's different, a movement, because our panel is about, the day is about movements, Islamist movements. So I would like to stress the difference between a movement and a group. A movement is ideological. A group is operational, is military. It's not the same thing. Behind almost all the groups, there are movements. Behind all the armed groups, there are all the military groups, Islamic military groups, there are ideological movements. So this is a difference which we have to keep in mind, because the movements are not the same than the groups. Secondly, when we talk about ideology, it's a system of ideas, but it's not a system of static ideas. It's a system of active ideas, which means that all the ideas are not active. There is a lot of ideas that are not really useful in days, I mean, in common days. They're interesting, they're very stimulating, but they are not active. We are talking here about active ideas means ideas that lead to actions, especially to violent actions on the field. And when we talk about Islamists, as you can see, the end of the world, the East, the Islamist, we are not talking about the religion of Islam. This is a huge topic that can take, 1 year to express what is religion, the Islam as a religion. This is not the topic. The topic is about Islamism, which is the same thing when you say extremism, fundamentalism, communism, socialism. All the words that finish but ism means that at the basic of it, of the foundation of it, you have an idea which is socialism, communism. So here we have Islam as a foundation, but you have an ideology that derives from it, that is called Islamism. So we are talking here about the ideology that is coming from, or that is based on using Islam as a religion. So what I'm talking about is a system of ideas that can be countered by only another system. This is the problem. You cannot defeat ideas with military weapons. It's very difficult. You can kill people, but you cannot defeat the idea. Ideas survive to the people who create them most of the time. Everybody dies one day, but the philosophers or people who put in ideas, they survive the ideas to them. So how to make the difference between all the Islamist movements compared to this? Our methodology is to use what we call cultural intelligence. I don't know what's the translation in Portuguese, but in French it's more intelligence culturelle. Cultural intelligence is a field that is not very developed in Europe in general. It's more developed in the United States and Canada. Cultural intelligence is about knowing the enemy ideology and strengths, trends, and movements, specific rules, and internal dynamics, religion, and beliefs. Cultural intelligence is not about knowing the culture. It's not about learning, I know the Islamic culture, or I know the culture of Morocco or of Algeria. This is not about it. We are talking about the ideas, the cultural ideas that are active. This means the cultural ideas that can lead to actions, that can make people move, act in a certain way, especially if this way is violent. I give an example, for example, of a cultural idea in the Islamic world. The idea of honor is an active idea. It's an active idea because if you touch or if you use, you instrument the idea of honor in Arab or Islamic societies, you can have a war. You can have a war for a long time. Between tribes, you can have a war for clans, you can have a war between families, you can have killings, assassinations. So this is what we call an active ID, cultural ID. Cultural intelligence deals with active cultural ideas, not with all the ideas of the culture. We don't have time to deal with all the culture. There are people who can learn about culture, but this is about active thing. So the culture here is defined within cultural intelligence. It is defined as the strategic knowledge Strategic knowledge means that the knowledge you need to lead the country where you are, to be in charge of the responsibilities in this country. It doesn't mean knowing the other, to understand each other's. This is another topic. This is about civilization. Culture is an actionable knowledge on the short term. This means that you use it to solve problems, societal problems, military problems, security problems, by using the culture. The cultural tool, the tool that you use when you use cultural intelligence, is what we call cultural mapping. Cultural mapping and profiling is to try to understand the link between culture, action, and territory, what we call the CAT. Looking for the CAT is whenever the country is, whenever the situation is, looking what is the relationship between culture, action, and territory. So that's what we try to do during 2 years. We have one mission every month in one country with a lot of people interviewing and going there and seeing what is the link between culture, action, and territory in different Arab and Muslim countries. So here's the general overview of what we discovered. I hope that you see what is written there, because it's too little, I think. I'm sorry. Part of what is written on this map, you know it because it's historical. For example, the first part. So let me give you a little summary of Islam before going to Islamic movements, because if you don't have any idea about the evolution of Islam, you will not probably have an idea what is Islamic movements today. So Islam, for the dams, in 5 minutes, is the following. So you have Muhammad, 1632, discovered Islam. After his death, 30 years after his death, you have 4 main trends that appeared. I don't enter the details, and I apologize for professors, especially who are experts in this field. I'm really summarizing for actionable knowledge. You have 4 main trends that are here. The first one is called Kharijit, second one Shiites, third one Sunni, and fourth one Sufi. These are the main 4 almost trends or movements that appear 30 years after the beginning of Islam. It's like the Catholic and Protestants and Orthodox in the Christian world, just that you have an idea about the differences. So I will not talk a lot about this one, because today this one is represented only by one state, which is the Sultanate of Oman. The only state that is today Muslim and Kharijit Ibadit is Oman. It doesn't represent a lot, and these are mostly peaceful people, so we're not interested in them today. And then I'm not talking neither about these here, the Sufi, even though they are very influential and they have a lot of presence, as you can see in Morocco, North Africa, in Western Africa, in Senegal, in Western Africa too. All of them are mainly in Africa. You have in Turkey, you have in Asian countries. But all these Sufis are so nice that are not interested in them. They're not making attacks, terrorist attacks, etc. So I'm not talking about them. They're very interesting as friends, but they're not very interesting as Islamist movements today. What I'm talking about is these 2 in the center, Shiites and Sunni, which is almost 10% of Shiites in the world, 200 million people, and 80% of Sunni, which is almost 1,300,000,000 people. It's huge, okay? So what happened 30 years after is that for the Shiites, almost 100 years after, they had 4, I'm trying to show it because they have here 3 different movements that appeared. Zaydids, Alawites, Imamites. Today, they are represented, Zaydites are in Yemen, mostly. Alawites are in Syria, and Imamites are mostly in Iran. They are also in Iraq and Lebanon, but they are here today. So these are different inside the Shiites. So the main idea is the following today. After 2014, what happened is that this organization here, ISIS, the Islamic State, has made it again the same war that appeared 14 centuries ago. He made it again very vivid, very active, which is the war between all these Shiites and all these Sunni. You can see this war almost in all the countries today, except in the Sahel, in Africa, but in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, it is a battle, a fight between the Shiite and the Sunni. But what is interesting and what we discovered is that within this camp here, this movement, the Shiites, you have also a competition between the different trends of Shiites. They compete especially for hegemony. Everyone wants his trend to be the main trend of the entire group. Today, for example, you have the Imamites, the 12ers, who want all the others to be like them. So the Imamites, the only state which is now Imamite is Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. They are trying to influence all the Shiite groups in Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen so that they convert from these parts to this one. So not only you have a competition between Shiites and Sunni, but you have also a competition inside this one for the hegemony of one of them. And also, if you take the Sunni, the majority, you have different groups and movements too. Mainly, you have Hanbalites, it has been talked about earlier. You have Hanafites, you have Shafi'ites, you have Malikites. They are from the same group, Sunni, but they compete between them. This competition is very active and it's almost daily. For example, until 2013, this trend of the Sunni Shafi'ite, represented by the Muslim Brotherhood, has been the leader almost everywhere. They won the elections almost everywhere. They were in charge. They have a president in Egypt, and they have a government in Tunisia. They still have a government in Morocco. So this trend, for example, of Sunni Muslim, Shafi'ite Muslim Brotherhood, has won the ideological battle until 2013. And then, when the president of Egypt has been overthrown, replaced, it has been replaced by another group who is this one, the Sunni Hanbali Salafi. The Salafi one, represented especially by Saudi Arabia, who took over these one and who are now helping the president, for example, of Egypt to get rid of the competing group against them. And if you look to the last crisis in the Gulf countries, especially between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, the foundation of this is mainly a competition between two trends of Sunni Islam. It's not even only the competition between the trends of Sunni and Shiite. It's within the Sunni, you have a competition between this trend and this one. What I'm talking about here is not specific to Islam. It happened in Christianity. It's almost the same thing. I can show you the same picture when we have in the 16th century, you have Christians, Catholics, and Protestants. Within the Protestants, you have many Baptists, you have Quakers, you have Pentecostals, you have etc., Anglicans, Puritans, etc. And with the Catholics, you have also different strands. And it happens that they fought against them, and at the end of the 16th century, every trend has ended up to a state that is dominated not by the religion, it's dominated by one of the trends. That's what we are what's what we are happening now. Every trend of Islam wants to make its own state. For example, if you take Turkey, Turkey is Sunni, it's Shafi'ite, the major trend is Muslim Brotherhood, so we can say today that Turkey is a Muslim state, even so it's secular, that is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood ideology or movement. If you take Saudi Arabia, it's a Muslim state that is dominated by Salafi. If you take Qatar, it's a Muslim state dominated by Muslim Brotherhood until now, etc. I mean, if you take any state, you will see that there is a trend, a religious trend, that is fighting, competing with others, against the others, to establish its own ideology as the state religion. This is a very important discovery today. We are seeing an internal religious war inside Islam. The main problem is not really between the West and Islam today. If you take only figures, the statistics, every week you have 2,000 dead inside this war, internal here, and between these. 2,000 war every week between Muslims, killing each others. I mean, I'm not talking about only these two groups, Al-Qaeda and ISIS. No, I'm talking about one. We establish it in different inquiries. We have today 210 armed Islamist groups. Within the 210 armed Islamic groups, we have only two that are really well known in Europe and the West, that are Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And within these 200 armed groups, you have only two who are really targeting the West and not really priority. Their priority is not even targeting the West. Their priority is targeting each other, is targeting the others to take over them. This is a very important thing when you think how to counter it. If you think that you are the main enemy, you will not use the same strategies against these groups. If you think that you are a secondary enemy, you can use the internal war inside these groups for your interest, your own interest. So this is, I'm sorry to be really short and going fast on these issues, but the idea here is to say that the state of today, the state of the art about what's going on in the Muslim movement, you have two main ideas. The first one is there is a war between the Shiite movement of Islam and the Sunni movement of Islam everywhere. It's an ideological war, military war, economic war, cultural war, everywhere, in Africa, in the Middle East, in Europe, everywhere. This is a war, a global war between Sunni and Muslim. The second main findings of the study is that inside the Shiites, you have a competition between different currents and trends that are competing for hegemony, and they want to convert the others to their own thing. And we have the same movement here. Inside the Sunni, we have a competition and a rivalry between them. They are trying to take over, to take the hegemony, and to convert others to their group. So I'm going farther. I'm giving you an example, a very practical example. So we studied the issue of the veil, the women's veil, because the way to see the veil is different in the West of in these countries. We're talking about Muslims, so it should be a problem of Muslims, not a problem of the West. So we looked, what is a veil? Because I'm not putting all the forms of veil here. I'm putting only the four main veils that are available. So we tried to look how much is it, how many people, how many women, how does it work? Are they aware of it or not? Where does it come from? And what we discovered is that each veil belongs to a movement. The veil is the sign of a religious movement, of an Islamist movement. it's very important of an Islamist movement, not a religious movement. If I take this one, the chadar. The chadar is really the veil of the Shiite Imamites of Iran. What I'm saying here is that the chadar was not the veil of Iranians before the Islamic Republic came in 1979. When Khomeini, Ayatollah Khomeini, founded the Islamic Republic of Iran, he imposed by the law, by the military, by the security service, he imposed to the Iranian people a new veil to the women, which is called the chadar, this one. And it is, since 1979, this veil, if you put it like this means that you are Shiite Imamite from Iran probably, or influenced from Iran, or you have someone in your environment that is from Shiite Imamite doctrine or ideology. If you look to the hijab, this one appeared and was promoted by Sunni Shafi'i Egypt, especially the Muslim Brotherhood. So if you want really to trace it, you can say that this is the Muslim Brotherhood veil. This is not the Islamic veil, this is not the religious veil, this is an Islamist movement veil. So the niqab, same thing, Sunni Hanbali, especially from Saudi Arabia. The burqa, Sunni Hanafi from Afghanistan. These are historical facts. It's not something, I didn't put the jilbab, for example, which is a new trend. I didn't put the burkini. Oh, I'll talk about the burkini later. So what happens here is when a woman puts the veil, the translation from a cultural point of view, cultural intelligence, is that she converted to one of these trends. Example, if she was with this veil and she moved to this one, this means practically that she was Sunni Shafi'i and she became Sunni Hanbali. So what we call in the West radicalization, for example, which is a woman moving, for example, from this to this, actually you can translate it as conversion from this movement to this movement. It's like converting from, for example, Catholic Roman or Latin to Protestant evangelist. It's exactly the same thing. You can have exactly the same movement. For example, in Africa today, you have the American evangelists who are converting the Catholic Christians from Christianity, Catholic Christianity, to Protestant evangelics. And it shows it by different things like this. It's the same thing that is going on now in Islam. Women are taken, Muslim women, are taken into an internal war to Islam, competition between movements. So sometimes they don't even know that by changing the veil, they change it, the Islamist movement they are belonging to. Those who are aware are the commanders, are the chiefs, the ideologists. They are who are in charge of the movement. They know that imposing this one, telling her this is not a good Islamic veil, this is the good one, because this way we see your face. Telling her this actually is converting her. So we are seeing this really very well. The government of Tunisia has funded a study about the veil because he was worried about the disappearing of the Tunisian veil. So I don't think I put it. No, I didn't put it. So as you can see here, all the veils has colors, and the original color is of the Sunni Hanafi veil is blue. Here is brown, black, and black. The North African veil is white. The North African veil, which is called in Algeria hayek, and in Tunisia, for example, safsari, the veil is dated from 10 centuries. And since 10 centuries, because this veil is Sunni Maliki, we don't have it here. I'm sorry, I didn't have, but you can see it if you put on the internet Safsari or Hayek, the Algerian veil. You will see that the veil until 2000, almost 2000, it was white since 10th centuries. And what happened from the competition between all these veils, the traditional North African veil has almost disappeared. There is almost no more white veils in North Africa. All the veils today are almost black. They are black because you have two movements who win the ideological battle. You have the Shiite Imamite veil that win on the others and imposed its color, which is the black. And also you have the color of the Muslim Brotherhood, the Sunni Hanafi, that imposed itself too. And since 2014, the Islamic State, the organization of the Islamic State, has also imposed the exact equivalent of the chadar here, the black. So the veil became here, even for the Sunni, it became black. Why is this? Because you have a competition between the Islamic Republic and the Islamic State. Here we come to the what we showed you before, which is the competition between Sunni and Shiites. The Shiites has already made their state, and this state is called the Islamic Republic. This is the official name. It's not the name that I gave to Iran. This is the official name. Iran is not called Iran. Iran is called the Islamic State of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. So what happened is that until 2014, the Sunni, the majority, have absolutely no Islamic republic. They have no Islamic state. What happened is that ISIS has created and took the brand. We are the Islamic State, means we are the Sunni Islamic State. So now we have two organizations that are competing, the Islamic Republic on the ideological level and the Islamic State, who are competing ideologically to say we are the revolutionary. Remember the Iranian Revolution and the creation of the first theocracy in the Islam world. And we have the translation on this type of things, which now we can say that all this has been defeated. What we lost now is this veil, black, for the Shiites, which is different from, if you see, I didn't put it here, the veil of the Islamic State. So I gave this example, but I can give it on the birds of man. It's exactly the same. It's more a course of cultural intelligence, so I will not go into but you have signs of all these trends. The idea is to say that today we are in an internal competition inside Islam and inside Sunni Islam. And this competition between all the trends make people change of their veil, they may remove it, they can change it, they can come from another to another. It's not about radicalization, it's about conversion. It's a religious war inside Islam. How much time do I have? 1 or 2 minutes, wonderful. So, I'm sorry, I will not explain the Islamic movements in the Gulf countries because it's the detail of what I explained. I haven't the time to explain the Islamic movements in the Mashriq. Mashriq is the countries in the middle. And I don't have time to explain in detail the Islamic movements in the Maghreb. But you have them in my book for those who read French. Islamist terrorist groups, I don't have it neither, because so I go. Oh yeah, so mapping. This is about the study that I talked to you about mapping, because when you have the relation between culture, territory, and action, which is cultural intelligence, culture, territory, and action, you can make maps. Mapia. That's it? So you can make maps of the trends, of the ideological trend. So for example here, this is the mapping based on the Islamic movement of Tunisia. And you have, ideologically, how the different groups are dominating. For example, we see that the east part of the country is dominated more by the ideology of Islamic State, whereas the west part is more dominated by the ideology of Al-Qaeda. And if you take it on the little by little, city by city, because you can do it, you can observe it. You can observe it on the, I mean, we put here more than 100 students, master and PhD, who were looking and observing and counting, for example, women, which type of veil, which type of man, which type, etc. You can make it even on the city level. How much is Salafist, how much are Takfirist, how much are Khalifatist. I don't have time to explain the different movements, but it's very important to say that the ideology can be mapped, can be put on maps, and can be represented for decision makers, political decision makers, military decision makers, and security decision makers. Political decision makers can make strategies of development. For example, if they see that some parts are dominated here, for example, in the West, in the border, they are dominated by the ideology of ISIS, they can put a development strategy here. But if they see that here the strategy, they are dominated more by takfirs, they can put a cultural strategy to counter it. If they see they are dominated here by caliphates, they can put an economic strategy to counter it. So mapping the ideologies, putting them on maps, is a new, real stimulating trend that can give possibilities to decision makers, political, security, and military to have very targeted strategies and possibilities. I don't have time. We experienced this, of course, on France. So I made with my team the map of radicalization in France, especially where are the brotherhood in France are located and where are the people who are more about the Islamic State, who are more sympathizers. So we made a map that has been taken by the government, by the previous government, to make what we call in France zone de sécurité prioritaire, priority security zones, based on this, which makes the Ministry of Interior work more closely on the territories. And yeah, that was the conclusion. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Of course, there will be much more to be shown and to be seen. But if we stick to the schedule, and if Nuno Lemos Pires also makes it in 30 minutes, then we'll have some time for debate, which I think will be very, very useful. Nuno Lemos Pires, the floor is yours.
I can speak in Portuguese, but I think I should speak in English, right? I think it's what I'm invited to do in English, isn't it? So, and because we want to trade some arguments, although it was very useful to have this kind of presentation before, because all that I'm going to say is going to be a little bit in line, but a little bit in depth. So I'm going to put a little bit of uniform on this ideology and try to make a strategic path out of it. So what I'll try to do is to divide Islamic movements in 5. It's exclusively my responsibility. So I didn't copy this from anywhere. It's just my responsibility. I decided to give a kind of a classification. And I'll try to explain why. So first is what I call the brand Al-Qaeda. Second, or the brand ISIS. Oh, I put, yes, brand Daesh, brand Al-Qaeda. Then I'll talk about the autonomous jihadists. So the ones who have, well, sometimes they are linked with one of those two groups, but the practice, what they do on the ground, what they do in the territory, it's not linked with Al-Qaeda or Daesh. Then I have what I call the hybrid, and this will be difficult to explain, but hybrid is some kind of political movements that have a kind of a violent past, although now they say they don't have a violent past, or they don't have a violent past, but they do have a violent narrative, a violent ideology, that maybe, if they take the power, they'll apply it. Or they can have one of two things. They can have a group, and they can have a political party. The political party will do the political part, and they'll have a group to do the violent part. You know, it's like Sinn Féin. You can have Hamas and Al-Aqsa, Qassam brigades, and I'll explain this later. Fish and Jia, etc. So this is what I call hybrid groups. And then let's talk a little bit about jihadism, but in a violent and non-violent. Because I wear a uniform, I'm always looking for end states. So if your end state is taking the power, usurping the power, imposing a will, even if you don't use violence to get there, isn't it jihadism anyway? So that's one of the, I have a lot of challenges to bring here, so let's see. What I try to do is, for the first two, was to compare narratives, and I go to the source. So I see what they publish, and I just walk through their narratives. So although I go a little bit, I go back and I go to Ibn Taymiyyah, we already talked about him. I go to Wahhab, I try to read some of Hassan al-Banna, and of course Said Qutb. I read a lot of Said Qutb because it's more or less a little bit of a bestseller for many of these two groups, although you put it in one category, but it's used for many of the categories. Said Qutb, Milestones, is one of those bestsellers that is used for jihadism theology. But I decided to go to the, what are they writing about right now? In the last 2-3 years, what is Al-Qaeda writing in Inspire, Resurgent, Al-Qaram, and what is Dabik and Rumiyya from the Islamic State, what are they saying they want to do? It's a lot of ideology. It's a lot of romantic views. It's a lot of violent narrative, very, very violent narrative if you consider the Dabik magazines and the Rumiyya magazines. So I dwelled in it to see the differences and to see what they are coming. So let's start with Daesh. Daesh is what Philippe Edouard, for instance, called it a hybrid political group, because of course it makes no distinction between state and religion. This is a fact. So there is no way you can talk about something that we in the Western world consider separated, like religion in one side and state in the other. They are both the same thing. You cannot separate it because the notion of state is also a notion that is not considered by Islamic State. Everything must be taken by violence until you are sure that everybody agrees. So violence is a mean, it's not an option. And there is historical claims, and it became so. Everything they do, it always try to have in the narratives that it was done because you had to decapitate someone, you had to crucify someone, you have to. Everything is trying to be followed by logic, and in the Dabik magazine #2, you can have a kind of a menu that explains for each punishment why is it done. Then they are takfiri in a sense that they are allowed to declare someone apostate. If you declare someone takfir, means that you are entitled to enslave them or to kill them. And then in a certain sense, and that's a big difference between, for instance, the ideology from the Taliban, they are techno-guerrillas. So they use all the scientific Islamic movements. So social science is forbidden, but mathematics and physics are allowed, and they have to be used. So information, communications, deep web, dark web, everything is to be used on their benefit. So the ideology, and I pick up Said Qutb's Milestone book, is very, very simple, because it's not written to be difficult to understand. And sometimes, let me go a little bit to the conclusions, sometimes we try to do counter-narrative in a very complicated way. And they do their propaganda in a very, very easy way. They say the world has two sides, the right side and the wrong side. It's Dar al-Islam and Dar al-Harb. So the land of hostility or the land of war, and then there is the land of Islam. You are on the right side, you are on the wrong side. If you're on the right side, you're okay. If you're on the wrong side, you're bad. That's it. It's very simple. And if you can read it, is you can only be in one place, only one way, where the Islamic State rules, where you have the Sharia, and of course, anyone else that is not in this place is in the home of hostility and the home of war and the house of war. That's Dar al-Harb. So, how can they do it? They use all platforms of propaganda. Propaganda meaning Muslim communities, not Western. We think sometimes that they are aiming at us. They are not. They're probably aiming also to us, but it's basically to the Muslim communities to try to convert, to convince, to intimidate many of the communities. And of course, they have a strong financial stability, 4 million euros a month, 300 million euros, and sometimes you can see the different sources I will give in the paper, but it's very, very, very funded. So as a global objective, now going from strategy, ideology, and then objective, so going from top, bottom, let me start with upper. What do they want? They want to rule the world. Okay? So, Neo-Salafism, Kharijite, Neo-Kharijite, doesn't matter. The only message is the only way. There is no other option. for the future of the world. Islam is the solution. Their view of Islam, of course. So for that, they say that you have to destroy all Western heritage, cultural heritage, historical heritage, borders, habits, everything. Ummah, the community of believers without borders. And then, of course, starting with all the corrupt governments that right now are governing Muslim countries. Strategy, one level below. How do you do it? Al-Nasri, you can have different sources, Al-Suri and other books, the Shihadis, you can download it from internet, it's very easy. But everyone has a very easy strategy. It's also too easy to understand. First, you have to co-opt other groups. So, co-opt local authorities. Make sure that they are with you. That's all about the Sunni awakening that General David Petraeus did in 2007 to counter the radicalization in Iraq after the chaos of Paul Bremen, 2003-2004, putting the Bahatis all away. So the way around it is like exactly what Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi did in 2014. He made a relation with the Sunnis who were under the pressure of the Shiites. He used this message to say, we are with you. So I will give you complete autonomy, you can rule, you can have your money, but you have to accept the laws of Islamic State, the Sharia, and appliance. Very simple strategy. So second stage is to apply the revision of Sharia. Of course, have a lot of social aid, and please do not undermine this aspect. I know that is thinking about Daesh, how can there be social aid? But there was in the beginning, especially punishing all of the corrupt people who were ruling the cities in the Sunni districts. And all of these made a huge impact, having people to go to their side, of course. In the end, the practice every day made a little bit different. So where can we find the strategy? We can find in Zawahiri, who was the first leader of the Daesh, although it was called Al-Qaeda in Iraq in 2004 and 2005. And it's more or less in 5 phases. First, convince all the Muslims to come to the Muslim world. Do the hijrah. Then do the congregation and the preparation, a kind of you get to the ground and now you're going to get prepared to be a good Muslim in their fight. Then fight the Dagut. Dagut is idolatrous, infidels, anyone who opposes the system. Prepare to fight. Then do the Tamkin, means consolidated territory. That's where they consider they are now. They're trying to consolidate territory. And then, if possible, let's expand the caliphate. So this is in Dabik number 1, the return of caliphate. It's very precise, it's very objective, and it says more or less 14 years old because it was written in 2004, and it's still updated. How do they do it? They use all platforms, but please bear in mind that the platforms are not used only to pass information or to do propaganda. The internet, the deep web, the dark web, everything is used to intimidate. But especially inside the Muslim communities. Whenever a moderate Muslim, whenever you have a brave Muslim that comes out and speaks against violence, he is going to be bullied on the internet. His pictures are going to show up, and he's going to be insulted. And his family is going to be shown in the internet, in Facebooks, in Instagrams, in Telegrams, and groups. So it's a huge instrument of intimidation in Europe, but especially in Muslim countries. And we should not forget about this dimension of intimidation because it's like cyberbullying you have in schools. You have, of course, these jihadist cyber movements doing as well. Then, of course, they use the internet to talk about tactics. And this is the insider pages of Rumiyya. I'll stop talking about Rumiyya the moment I go to internet and they are no longer there. But as long as they are there and I just open it and I take 1 minute to take the magazines out, I will still talk about these Dabik and Rumiyya magazines because they are too easy. Any kid can take it and download it immediately from the internet. You just have to write it on Google. You don't have to go to any specific sites. But look, the idea is the first one you have is a radical manual, how to become a lone wolf. That is published in 8 different languages. It's available for downloading, 92 pages, very simple. And then you can have just tactics inside any Rumia magazine, how to attack, how to use a van against, how to use a knife. Everything is publicized. And it's still, today, 2017, is still too easy. Sorry. It's coming back. So, as you can see, the messages continue, and it's not about dialogue. It's not about convincing, it's about massacring. It's about we and them, it's about killing. So, like this sense here, why we hate you and why we fight you, there is no negotiating. So, any image that you find, then it looks like next stage. When you read the Rumias, and the Rumia number 10 just came out 1 week ago, it's all about attacking the Taliban and attacking the Russians and attacking the new Al-Qaeda strategy. But if you look at it, it always gives very simple images. Like, for instance, they put this attack in London, in Westminster Bridge, and they say, 1 man killed 4 and wounded 50. Simple messages. So, what is the visible strategy? It's very simple, and I agree exactly what my colleague said before. They are not aiming at us. They are aiming to consolidate through Bayat and through Vilayat provinces and sacred oath to expand their territory. And what they do outside is to intimidate, to show 2 things. Internally, to show that European powers are weak, vulnerable, and they cannot defeat them. Externally, they are showing to these people right here, go away. Let us rule this place alone. We don't want to see you here. So it's intimidation campaign. Make sure all the governments from these places withdraw all the help, all the money, all the interaction, all the culture, all the tourism, everything. It is to expel. This is the strategy. So, number 2, Al-Qaeda. Now I'm going only to dwelling on differences because I'm not going to repeat everything again. First, of the updated strategy from Al-Qaeda to expose Daesh. They are now fiercely in combat. And they give a coherent message since the 90s. You must remember that things didn't start to happen in 2001, nor 2003 with the invasion of Iraq. This is much older, much more coherent, and probably the year of the change was 1979 and not 2001, not 2003. Those are the years that exponentiated the awareness of the Western powers, but it was already there. And everything was written there is a coherent message. And it's against the United States and their allies, the big Satan. And of course, they talk about the true Ummah because the Caliphate is not a true Ummah. The ISIS Caliphate is not a true Ummah because they have a Caliph, and you cannot have a Caliph, you can only have a leader because he was not elected. So, what has al-Zawahiri has said in his messages? He was silent for 2 years, 2013, 2014, he was not speaking. But at the same time, he was watching what ISIS was doing and expanding and getting terrain. And when he saw that he had the right message, 2 things came at the same time. A huge interview by the speaker of the Al-Qaeda, Adam Yahigadan. He made a 90 pages interview where he exposes the new faces for Al-Qaeda. At the same time, he published a video in 2016 and now in January 2017, basically to say we are going to focus more on local politics. We are going to still maintain our path in global jihad. And some people were very surprised by it, but you shouldn't be. Remember, Osama bin Laden did his bayat to Mullah Omar, the Taliban. And what did al-Zawahiri did in June 2016? The same. He did his bayat, his oath to the leader of the Taliban, Mullah Mansour. He did that to make sure that you use an alternative of an Islamic state. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan is what Al-Qaeda proposes instead and comparing with Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. They give an alternative. So there are a lot of differences between Al-Qaeda and Islamic State. First of all, when they talk about kidnapping, it's not to kill the hostages, but to trade the hostages. They don't attack Shiites like the Daesh does. They attack the Iranian leadership. They call it the Safavids. They call it, of course, they want the power, but not the people itself, because for the Al-Qaeda group, Muslim blood is sacred. So you cannot attack another Muslim. But for Daesh, it's not sacred. So you can attack as long as you call it Rafidan, as well as you call it Shiites, and even then you can attack them. So then you get a rhetoric. You heard about the Kharijite, but the Kharijite is an idea, as a concept, not as a Ibadites that still live in Oman, but as a concept that came from the Battle of Siffin in 657, is a concept of someone who is literalist, someone who gets completely away. And Al-Qaeda calls the ISIS as Kharijites, to say you are not part of the Muslim world. You deviated too much because you use violence in the media, and you choose a caliph and you can only choose a leader. And of course, when you go to a region, you impose external commanders, foreign commanders. And you can see in the Emirate Islamic of Afghanistan, the Talibans, local commanders are always local people, never foreign fighters. So show the difference. You know? And of course, for Daesh, anything you can apply takfir. For Al-Qaeda you cannot. And you can call for arbitrage for Al-Qaeda, but you cannot call for arbitrage for Daesh because they call it bid'ah, innovation, and you cannot apply it. So big differences. You say, is that a big difference? Oh yes, it is. Because they are leveraging. They are getting back to their rules, to the basic rules. And what are going back? They are going back to the references, you know? When they go to Abdullah Yusuf Hassan, the founder of Al-Qaeda, before Osama bin Laden, who wrote The Defense in the Muslim Lands, he's a very, very well written, you remember this PhD from Palestine. He wrote and destroyed all the Karl von Clausewitz theories about war and politics. Brigadier General Malik has a foreword by the Chief of the Army of Pakistan. Remember this book, The Quranic Concept of War, destroys completely our Western way to see politics and war. Because war is not against the state, war is against the heart of the infidel, the soul. And you can use terror as a weapon because you want to recreate the caliphate. So these basic books that were written in 1979 and before 1989 are now the major trend. So what can you see now for an updated strategy? Well, attack Western targets in Muslim countries and not the Muslims themselves. And you can see this trend doing for their affiliates. Second, priority for Asia. Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Philippines, Indonesia, they are trending for the Asian part. A big call for lone wolves. They didn't do it 3 years ago, but now they're doing. Rebrand bin Laden. So Hamza is back, the lion of jihad. Abu Mu'adh, the son of bin Laden, is back. They're using him as picture, as images. So the bin Laden's heritage is back. Demonstrate long-term commitment, saying we are not here to take territory, we are here to have an idea, and we only achieve when we have the Ummah. That will happen in 150 years. They are here to stay, to demonstrate, of course, the difference between them and Daesh. Attack the Safavids of Iran, not Shiites, as I already explained. Reinforce Sayyid Quds ideology, again, going to Qutbids and going to Quds ideology as the main messages, and of course support any Muslim that is fighting their tyrant governments in their countries. Third group, independent jihadists. Well, some of them are not completely independent, but they have a very regional, ethnic, very, very followed agenda. So then we can find, and even we can find now, you know, mercenaries, just to work with these guys, you know, like Mahatma Tactical. They are ready to work any jihad campaign everywhere. This is how big this thing has grown. 210 groups, and many of them are very active, a lot of fighting going around the place, and the majority of them, we don't see it because it doesn't affect our Western world. That's why we don't hear about them. So what are the ideologies, strategies, and objectives? I just give you 3 examples so you can understand why I say they are different. For instance, Tahrir Hayat al-Sham in Syria. They are the merger of very different groups led by the Al-Nusra Front. Al-Nusra Front in the beginning was to become part of the Daesh. They said, no, we will side up with Al-Qaeda. But because Al-Qaeda said that Muslim blood must be sacred and they had to fight Daesh in the territory, they decided to make it autonomous. So Tahrir Hayat al-Sham has their own agenda, although they manifest sympathy with Al-Qaeda, they're independent. When you talk about Haqqani Network is a very strange case because Admiral Mullen, who was the Joint Chief of Staff in the Congress, he said, the Pakistani intelligence services are providing the help for Haqqani. This was a statement from the Joint Chief of Staff and corroborated by Leon Panetta, the Secretary of Defense. So when you have strong accusations like these, of course they have their own agendas. And the third international is like cases like Al-Shabaab. Although they say they are together with Al-Qaeda, they have a very regional agenda expanding from Somalia to Kenya. And then you have the complicated cases. It's complicated because it depends who classifies who. If you go to Hamas, if you go to Hezbollah, if you go to Muslim Brotherhood, many countries will consider them as terrorists, many don't. You just saw the discussion 1 month ago in the United States, Rex Tillerson, and there's huge discussion in the United States about considering or not considering Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist group. Look, I'm not here to make interpretations, but this is one where you get the hybrid interpretation. The Muslim Brotherhood of 1937 of Hassan al-Banna, was it violent? Yes, it was. And it was of Said Qutb. It changed the rhetoric. Hamas just changed the rhetoric in 2017, now 2 months ago. So the problem is you have hybrid views, you have different times and different schedules, you have different calendars. And at the same time, you can have a different kind of hybrid. You can be a political party and have someone to do the dirty job for you. That's why I put there the FIAS that was elected in Algeria, but they have to fight the Jihad. Or you have the Hamas and you have the Al-Qassam brigades who do the fighting. Or then you can dwell between Hezbollah is considered as a party for the United Nations, is considered as terrorist for the European Union, United States, Canada, and other countries. So this is what I call hybrid, because it depends who classifies, when, where, and according with each agenda. So what kind of ideologies do these kind of hybrid groups work? They do practical work. Everyone knows that, of course, FIS and Muslim Brotherhood were very active helping people, having a social agenda, very intuitive. Hamas has a very work doing in Palestine groups. So they will try to convince you, and this is not a negative form I'm saying, in action, with practical reasons. That's why it's hybrid, that's why it's difficult to interpret. So it's the doubt. And it depends the country, the people, and the group you represent, who classifies them in terrorists, the ones who can represent them as militias, some will call them movements of freedmen, some they will call them the legitimate winners of elections, like it happened with Muslim Brotherhood and the FIS in Algeria. They won the elections, like Hamas. So it's about looking at the evolution. Are they violent and they transform in non-violent? Are they non-violent and they transform in violent? What is the rhetoric? So you have to look at very careful looking at the actions. So I always go back to this. We must not forget the importance of narratives. We cannot put back the importance of narratives and ideologies. They are too strong. In our Western world, we think this is not important. Yes, it is. It's all about understanding what motivates some people. And then you can go and see if he's a PhD or a thief. Doesn't matter. But what is the ideology? What is something that was thought and transforms people that are normal in brutal killers? And these two examples that happened in Alexandria, and I hope that you watch these movies, for instance, Agora. It's all about Christian fundamentalism, destroying the knowledge. When the first attack on Alexandria Bibliothèque was done, killing Hypatia, she was a mathematician, she was a woman in power. It was a way to show that women had no more power in this Christian fundamentalism of the 5th century. So when you read about Amr, the governor of Egypt, that under the Caliph Omar attacked and burned the books of Alexandria, you have to have the same idea of the narratives. How strong can a narrative be that can destroy a whole culture or a whole system? And this is something that we're not paying enough attention. So, last group. Does jihad has to be violent? It can be non-violent if you get what you want in a different way. It's all about strategy. It's the end state that matters. It's not the way you get it. Ends, ways, and means. So even if you don't choose violence as a path, when you announce things, and this is important because you see Christian Anandpur and his CNN interview to Shudari, the leader of the Islam for UK group, and then Sharia for UK group. He was allowed to speak on TVs. He was allowed to give interviews asking for violence in UK. Of course, the majority of the Muslim community in UK hated him, yes, but he was allowed to do it. He had a non-violent direct action, but his words were filled of violence. And we saw one of the attackers now in London. One of them made an interview in Channel 4. So you have to go and see what they're saying. Sharia for France, forbid, freedom can go to hell. Yes, they are not legitimate any longer. Now they are put aside. But you have to watch out when you see phrases like this around the world. You have to see the non-violent action, but the violence in the narratives to make sure that you know what is happening. So in conclusion, jihadism is not the end. You have to see by the end, not the mean. So do not try to look at the actions. Go for the global ideas. See what any group or ideology behind the group is proposing. Second, please do not put everything in the same bag. The same way it's terrible to put Islam and Islamism in the same bag and to identify groups with people as a generic thing. It's offensive and it's not intelligent. It's completely wrong to see Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram as the same as Jemaat Islamiyah in Indonesia. They're completely different. Or the Chinese Uyghurs, or the Chechens in Russia. They all have different agendas. They all have different peoples. They come from different madhabs, different schools. They all come from different, and so please, case by case, narrative by the narratants in the division that I proposed. And then there is only, well, it will be arrogant of me to say it's only, but there is a main way, there is what I consider the only way to make sure that we, as a whole, all of the communities can fight this kind of extreme ideology is being determined against any narrative that is totalitarian or imposing. Make sure that we apply the Human Bill of Rights that applies to all humanity, and make sure that we will not conceal in anyone to make this different for anyone. If we can do it, we can win it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we still have some reasonable time to debate. I would apply to your questions both in English or in Portuguese. If you don't feel comfortable in asking your questions in English, you can do it in Portuguese, and I'll do my best to translate to our panelists. So, the gentleman on the second line here. Aqui embaixo. Eu pedia só que se identificassem, por favor.
Tenente-General Mário Cardoso, I think I will feel more comfortable if I can put my question in Portuguese and you make the favor to translate.
Of course.
Em primeiro lugar, queria felicitar todos os palestrantes, não só desta mesa, como também o keynote speaker, o Sr. Professor António Dias Farinha, a quem eu convido também a, se quiser, responder a uma questão ou duas que eu vou fazer. A primeira questão era o seguinte: todos os islamitas estão conformes ou estão conforme as teorias aqui apresentadas? E se estão, o que é que podem fazer para resolver esta ameaça tida como global da forma como a apresentaram? Quer transmitir? E depois eu faria uma outra pergunta.
So the idea is, General is asking if all the people in Islam can be included in these theoretical frameworks.
Yes.
Just a moment. I'm going to make you another question. All of you. O problema é o seguinte: isto é uma ameaça global, isto é efetivamente uma guerra de civilizações. Uma guerra não pode ter muitas contemplações. Como é possível, se esta é uma guerra que tem como finalidade que o islamismo seja o poder mundial, não haver, como há, movimentos contra a presença de islamitas em sítios onde eles não são queridos, porque não é este o tipo de civilização que se pretende. And now I do not make more questions. Please, Professor, feel comfortable also if you can to say something.
So the second question was if these kind of movements want to retain world power, if there shouldn't be movements against this kind of movements. That was the question.
Actually, the versus clash of civilizations and internal clash into Islam, today, I'm talking about today, I'm not talking about 2011, I'm not talking about today. The state of the Islamic world entirely is really more an internal war. It's every day. I don't see, even Daesh, even ISIS, today his main objective, his main goal is not to conquer the West, to impose Sharia, to conquer France, to conquer Andalusia. It's absolutely not. His main objective is to win against the others, especially against Al-Qaeda, his main rivalry, it has been explained, and then to win against the Islamic Republic of Iran, and then potentially to put different people in different countries. We don't have today really this perspective of the world, and we have to distinguish the words when they talk. I mean, when they put a map with ISIS everywhere in black, when they put Spain with black, we will take back Spain from the Spanish to the Muslim, etc. There are words and there are the common people who are ready to fight. I think that everybody is okay today with saying that the South is Muslim, the North is most Christian culture. This is an idea that we saw on the field. They are okay with this distinction. The problem is who rules the South? Who will win there? So I don't see really a clash of civilizations. We have today in the different countries, Muslim countries, we have almost the same type of groups that are fighting against others that we call progressist, modernist Muslims, moderate Muslims, etc., who are actually Western thought, Western culture. They want to live like the West. They want to think like the West. And they are Muslim in their countries, especially between women, and they fight against others. So it's not, today I really will say that Huntington is not right. Today. Maybe it will be in 20 years or 30 years. But today there is absolutely no clash of civilizations. There is clash inside Muslim, between moderate Muslims, progressive Muslims, between moderate women, progressive women, against others, against other groups. It's common day. It's every day.
Let me just add a question into this one. If that is so, why so many events in the West, even if most of them are what we could say low-intensity events?
Okay, he used the word low intensity. I'm sorry to say that it's really nothing. I'm not. We have an attack in Paris yesterday. Okay, we have almost one attack every thing. But if there was not the media, I mean the freedom of expression, if there was not what we call the media focus on these things, it's really, I mean, if I take the same day, yesterday when there was this guy on the Champs-Élysées in France, at the same time we have a monitoring system around the incidents in the world, the attacks in the world. At the same time, you have in Iraq, you have more than 107 attacks. The same time, the same day. In Iraq only, I'm not talking about Yemen. Nobody talks about Yemen. Yemen is worse than Syria, than Iraq today, but nobody wants to look there. They're killing each other every day. We have starvation in Yemen. Starvation, I mean 4 million people starving. So I'm not for ethnocentrism. I understand that we focus on ourselves every day, but we shouldn't put strategies and policies and think our strategies and policies based on our ethnocentrism. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying we shouldn't take it seriously. We have to take it seriously. But I'm saying today, there is absolutely no group in the world, no Islamist group in the world, who can change our states, who can make our states fall, who can change our societies, who have even a strategic target in the West. They cannot. It's simple. I mean, you take with anybody who knows really these groups, they can make propaganda, they can recruit some people from here, from there, who will take a knife, who will stab someone, but they cannot touch the state, they cannot touch the culture. They can touch it if you believe it. If you believe it, yes, it can become really problematic. So in France, I recommended, for example, that a homicide, an assassination, should be treated in the media like an assassination, homicide. You cannot give the guy 12 hours or 24 hours of media coverage. You cannot, because you make it, you feed the beast. You feed the beast. So it's a problem that we have our psychology. It's our weakness today. But it's not a weakness of our states. Our states have never been so united, actually. I mean, almost there's a consensus almost in the West that liberty, freedom should prevail, whatever happens. And it's more about a psychological weakness today and a perception of the phenomenon.
We'll move to other questions, but let me just give the floor to Nuno Lemos Pires for a while.
Vou só acrescentar em português, também para ser mais rápido. I will speak in Portuguese just to be a little bit more faster. Só para acrescentar aqui duas dimensões. O poder das narrativas, deste islamismo, não é? Deturpado, mas que é utilizado de uma forma violenta, não pode ser descurado. Porque nós temos que olhar para a história e pensar que a Alemanha não é nazi, mas os nazis dominaram a Alemanha e os nazis mataram milhões de pessoas ao mundo e fizeram um genocídio por cima dos judeus. Isto aconteceu com pessoas normais. Aconteceu com pessoas normais em que alguns deles estavam, de facto, com a camisola vestida a pensar que era esse o fundamentalismo, mas a maior parte deles deixou que o sistema vingasse. Isto é muitas vezes o que acontece em zonas subjugadas. Obviamente quem vive ao sul não está de acordo com o Daesh. Mas quem tem 3 miúdos em casa tem que viver de acordo com as regras do Daesh, porque senão não consegue que os miúdos vivam no dia seguinte. Porque é morto, que é decapitado, é crucificado, é queimado vivo. Este nível de intimidação que aconteceu na história com Pol Pot, no Camboja, que é outro exemplo terrível, ou mesmo Mao Tse-tung nos seus tempos, Stalin nos seus desvios, ou seja, nós conseguimos sempre encontrar momentos de desvios da radicalização que podem acontecer porque as pessoas não ligam. Não quer dizer que a maior parte das pessoas adiram. Todos nós sabemos que, obviamente, que a esmagadora maioria dos alemães não eram nazis, mas permitiram que isto acontecesse. E ao permitir que isso acontecesse, nós temos que, as lições da história, dizer que temos que permitir que nunca volte a acontecer. Qual é o problema desta ideologia extremista do Daesh e da Al-Qaeda, que é baseada em verdades absolutas? E estas verdades absolutas que existiam, provavelmente não existiram durante o século XX, mas existiram durante o século XII, XIII, XIV e XV. Voltámos a um revivalismo medieval de dar algumas certezas absolutas. E geralmente aposta em 5 ou 6 mensagens. Qual é a mensagem dos radicais? Comum. Daesh, Al-Qaeda. Eles vão se agarrar a 5 ou 6 coisinhas muito simples para levar a pessoa para um caminho sem desvio. Primeiro é tentar dizer que o Alcorão não tem um contexto histórico. Ou seja, que o Alcorão foi revelado não naquela história, mas podia ser escrito hoje, como podia ser escrito há não sei quanto tempo. Isto é uma linha que aparece, obviamente, dentro de uma linha muito pequena de uma escola islâmica, mas que aparece. A seguir a dizer que a Sharia é divina. Toda a gente entende quando a Sharia é divina que foi buscar princípios divinos, foi buscar princípios que estavam no Alcorão, na Suna, nos Hadiths e a forma como foram. Mas se alguém chegar ao pé de uma pessoa que não saiba mais, dizer a Sharia é a ordem de Deus, tens de fazer assim, tens de cortar o pé. Isto são as tais ideias absolutas que se vão fazendo. A terceira ideia absoluta é do clube que se entra e que não se sai. Uma vez muçulmano nunca mais pode sair, porque está escrito no Alcorão que quem sai do mundo muçulmano merece a morte. Esta mensagem, que obviamente não está no Alcorão, o que se está a dizer, obviamente, que é não virar as costas a... Mas lá está. Se tirarmos a exegese, a hermenêutica, entender os textos como eles são, nós levamos aos tais exageros. A quarta é o Ishtvan, que é o direito de zelo. Dizer que um deve denunciar o outro sobre as práticas que o outro faz. A quinta é o credo al-Qadir, que foi no século XVIII, não é? Em que Al-Qadir, um líder abássida, peço desculpa, no século XV, vem dizer que a racionalidade fechou. Ijtihad, está fechada. Já não se discute mais nada. Tudo o que está escrito, a perspectiva mais salafista, neo-salafista, de uma das 3 escolas salafistas, que elas também são 3, uma das 3 escolas salafistas é dizer assim, Ijtihad foi fechada, a racionalidade fechou, tudo o que está no Rashudin, nos primeiros 4 califas, e naquilo que está no Sunni, já não se pode discutir mais. E depois juntarmos a isto um princípio que apareceu mais com os xiitas, que é o Taqiyya,
que a defesa que um xiita podia ter face a um sunita, de poder mentir para poder preservar a sua vida, isto é dito de uma forma enganosa a muita gente. Estas 6 coisas que eu acabei de dizer. Só para dizer o seguinte, eu não estou nada tranquilo em termos do futuro do mundo. É claro que as nações vão prevalecer, era o que faltava que não prevalecesse. É claro que nós vamos vencer, é claro que o mundo vai vencer, a ideia da Carta Universal dos Direitos Humanos vai prevalecer, eu não tenho dúvidas sobre isso. Mas até lá, neste momento, aquilo que é o santuário, a zona de conforto destes grupos jihadistas está a crescer no mundo. Não está a crescer. Pode estar a crescer em Raqqa e em Mossul, mas não está a crescer no Congo, nem no Mali, nem na República Centro-Africana, nem na Somália, nem no Iémen, como acabámos de ver, onde existem neste momento 108 milhões de pessoas em fome, dados das Nações Unidas, ou seja, um novo recorde que houve antes, quando se tenta dizer que o mundo está melhor, não é? Mas estes são os factos do mundo que estamos a viver hoje em dia. Portanto, a contra-radicalização tem que ser feita, e tem que ser feita por aqueles que a conhecem bem. E quem a conhece bem, obviamente, começa por ser as próprias comunidades muçulmanas, em que nós damos, obviamente, a voz àqueles que são os moderados, que são a maioria, deixá-los falar, protegê-los e ajudá-los para que não sejam intimidados e poder contrariar estas pequeninas... Eu só dei estes 6 exemplos, mas estes são 6 exemplos que são utilizados muito pelos radicais para conseguir pôr as pessoas perante uma certeza. É assim. Isso depois se é assim...
Muito bem. Mais questões? Creio que aquele senhor lá no fundo, na última fila, foi a primeira a levantar. Já está aqui um com o microfone na mão, depois vai para aí. Então, rapidamente aqui para o professor Dias Farinha, por favor, para responder ao Sr. General e depois ali.
Muito rapidamente, agradecer a pergunta do Sr. General, que me parece extremamente pertinente, e dizer que realmente... Eu orientei a minha exposição exatamente neste sentido. Falar da religião é um aspecto, mas o poder, o exercício do poder, estes grupos, em primeiro lugar, vão buscar o poder político, encontrar vias de... Depois também os aspectos económicos. Quer dizer, muitas destas lutas têm a ver exatamente onde existem possibilidades de petróleo, de gás, não surgem facilmente em tantos, embora também exista o Iémen. E depois as condições sociais em que vive toda esta gente. Quer dizer, nós estamos diante de um grupo de questões que têm depois apenas uma redução, como o Sr. General deixou prever, que vão arranjar um invólucro colorido da religião para justificar a luta do poder, a vontade económica, as más condições sociais e, portanto, vão falar da religião com a variedade que acabou aqui de ser expressa e muito bem expressa para, no fundo, dizer queremos isto, arranjar argumentos e, portanto, a sua expressão está correta. Onde é que está a relação, muitas vezes, destes movimentos todos com a teoria? Não há. Quer dizer, o que há é um invólucro com cores religiosas para justificar os outros aspectos mais relevantes. E, finalmente, a segunda pergunta que foi feita foi porquê é que, então, estes grupos estão aqui? Houve realmente aqui dificuldades. Eu exemplifiquei. Por isto, os muçulmanos, na Arábia Saudita, nos Emiratos, nestes países do Golfo ricos, vão buscar pessoas praticamente como escravas, ter os seus passaportes, não lhes pagam praticamente nada, não muçulmanos, exatamente para, e de diferentes nacionalidades, para nunca se fazerem grupos. Ora, na Europa não se fez exatamente isso. Quer dizer, o que se fez? Por exemplo, na Holanda, foram buscar trabalhadores e, por exemplo, no Norte da África, e puseram-nos a trabalhar. Depois mandaram vir as famílias com todos os direitos. E o que é que aconteceu a essas famílias? Formaram guetos. Em vez de haver uma integração e não existir aquela diferença entre as populações, o que eles fizeram foi criar guetos, criar animosidade, criar desenraizados, quer dizer, e, portanto, aqui, evidentemente, entra um aspecto que eu também não pude abordar, que é este. Quer dizer, há aqui um problema. É que estes grupos não se querem envolver com os outros na Europa. Não querem. Pura e simplesmente. E é o caso que eu também exemplifiquei, saindo um pouco fora do tema, com a Turquia. A Turquia, quer dizer, simultaneamente tem 4 ou 5 opções. e depois não sabem exatamente qual é a saída. Mas na Europa o que se deu foi ir buscar grupos, comunidades que se foram formando aqui e ali. Ao contrário, por exemplo, do que acontece com Portugal, felizmente. Com Portugal, os guineenses, cá estão, os moçambicanos, são muçulmanos de sempre e são portugueses de sempre. Quer dizer, estão integrados na comunidade. Não houve esse problema. Agora, diferentemente, é, por exemplo, os muçulmanos vindos do Bangladesh ou vindos do Paquistão, que são os grupos orientais, que não se misturam, eles distinguem-se muito bem uns aos outros e têm nomes diferentes uns para os outros, porque não se distinguem, não se misturam com os portugueses de origem, guineenses ou moçambicanos. São grupos separados. E, portanto, esse aspecto é a ter em conta e, nomeadamente, haver uma inversão das políticas que existiram de evitar formar ilhas culturais autónomas e muitas vezes divergentes, opostas, radicalizadas contra os outros grupos. Muito obrigado, senhor.
Agora aqui para este senhor, na terceira fila.
Muito bom dia. Eu sou o Coronel Fernando Montenegro, do Exército Brasileiro, também auditor aqui dessa casa e atualmente também doutorando em Relações Internacionais. Eu fico impressionado com a semelhança que tem na disputa de território, de poder entre as facções de crime organizado da América Latina e as disputas entre as facções do terrorismo internacional. Na América Latina, nós não temos essa problemática que tem aqui na Europa, na África, em outros sítios, em relação à jihad. Mas essa outra disputa que eu acabei de falar tem muita similaridade na forma de acontecer. Só que ela é motivada, logicamente, por interesses econômicos. E eu gostaria que os palestrantes falassem um pouco sobre a disputa econômica que tem por trás dessas disputas de poder entre as facções jihadistas e muçulmanas. Muito obrigado.
Another question up there and then we'll...
Muito bom dia a todos. O meu nome é João Ruxa Pereira. Sou consultor internacional de segurança e já fui aluno desta casa, que eu aproveito para felicitar o IDN por esta brilhante iniciativa. Quero também felicitar todos os oradores pelas excelentes exposições que nos fizeram e por uma questão que, de certo modo, o Sr. Coronel Lemos Pires também já respondeu um bocadinho. Com os conhecimentos todos que temos vindo a adquirir destes movimentos e que foram aqui muito bem expostos, até que ponto é que a partir daí nós podemos melhorar as estratégias de desradicalização, de que a Jéssica Stern, como sabem, foi uma das precursoras e que tem tido, de facto, alguns resultados em alguns países, e como é que podemos melhorar também as questões e as políticas de educação e de integração social que efetivamente não temos feito, não temos sabido fazer. E como disse o professor Dias Farinha muito bem, o que nós temos feito, no fundo, é a exclusão social e arrumar estas pessoas todas em guetos, que não é nada bom e que são proporcionais, aliás, que proporcionam e, como eu diria, formam o caldo ideal para depois irmos aí fazer movimentos fundamentalistas. Muito obrigado.
We could start with Mathieu Guider.
So, as you can see, we do not agree, Professor, me, and Colonel, about this situation. So let me summarize you the different options you have today. First option, I think it's a war of religion inside to Islam, and that people who are fighting, the jihadists or whatever their name, are fighting because they think they will win God's Allah, they will go to paradise. I'm interested in these guys. I'm interested in those who die, who are ready to die, because I don't have a lot of them in the West who are ready to die for something. So based on the fact that what makes the guy wants to die, I diagnose a religious war inside with religious motivations. So I do not agree with the social motivations. I do not agree with the psycho-motivations. Because, for example, if we take the narratives, for me, the narratives of the jihadists are religious narratives. This means that if you want to be influenced by these narratives, you have to be Muslim. I mean, you cannot understand hijrah, jihad, and engage, make yourself explode a suicide bomber if you do not adhere to a religious narrative.
Unless you find the narrative so interesting to a point that you can be converted.
You have to convert. And anyway, you have to convert. So we are in a specific way of dealing, which is religious radicalization. Based on this diagnosis, because if you don't follow me on this diagnosis, obviously the strategies that I recommend will be different. So my strategy today is the following. Let me redo again what is my diagnosis for France and for the world today, is to say that we have a religious fight inside Islam. This religious fight inside Islam between different groups, movements, currents, trends, is imported or exported, it depends on the point of view, is imported or exported from different locations to different other locations, including the West. For example, the competition between Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafi is imported by different politicians or exported by different groups in France. It's exported in Spain, it's exported in different ways. You have the same competitions between Muslim Brotherhood and the Salafi in Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf countries, in Egypt. Then you have it in France, in Spain, in Italy, and elsewhere. So for me, it's the diagnosis that is in the south of the Mediterranean Sea, in all the countries, is the same on the upper. And the north part of this is a collateral damage. It's a collateral damage of the war that is inside in the south. So based on this diagnosis, what I recommend is first recommendation is to keep the war out of the territory. Keep the war out of the national territory. This means I recommend, for example, for France, not to import the war. Do not import it. Explain to the people of France, for example, including the Muslim, that there is a war of religions there, that France is protecting you from this war. Because if you import it to France, you will have the same religious competitions, you may have the same religious war in your territory. So the French government will make communications and different actions to explain that the government is protecting the Muslims from having the war there, having them here. This is the first recommendation. Second recommendations, the media has to be aware of this, has to be aware that the media coverage of a terrorist act only benefits to the terrorist. It does benefit to nobody else, because the only mean of knowing the terrorist media group being able to do something is the media. I mean, if you go back to 50 years, 100 years, I mean, terrorist acts will not even be known all over the world. I mean, they will be assassinations somewhere, but it will not be known. So there is a part of media, very important strategy about the media.
So we shouldn't report.
We should what?
We shouldn't report.
We should report, but it's the way of reporting. You should not give them the space, more space than a homicide. It's not possible. It's not because the guy said Allahu Akbar. He didn't even, sometimes he injured someone. He injured someone, you give him a coverage of 24 hours a day, you recruit for Al-Qaeda, you recruit for Islamic State. It's obvious for me, and I saw it on the field, and people will be influenced. They want to be the media to talk about them. He's a criminal. Simply, he's a criminal, and a stupid criminal, because he uses different things. There hasn't even the training, etc. So the second part is about the media, and the third one is cultural. We don't have to be the fear. I mean, how do you say fear in
Medo?
Yeah. This is the main battle, actually. I do not fear these groups. I do not fear these groups. They are weak. They are weak military, which is the main thing. They are very weak military. They cannot even defeat an African country who hasn't even an army. So how can you, I don't understand people who fear these terrorist groups. Basically, knowing these groups on the field, knowing how they live, how they act, how it is Shibatic, how it is simple, I don't understand how we can. So the fear is the main battle, actually. We do not have to fear. For me, I recommend even to make jokes about them. Really, the main thing is to make jokes, how to make them ridiculous. Sometimes it's ridiculous. The guy has so many explosives in his house, and he's not able even to make a bomb. It's completely, if you take it in another way, you will see that it's ridiculous. We should make them ridiculous completely. And I recommend so to use humor against these people, not take them more important than they are. This is my opinion today, according to these groups. Sorry.
About the question of the financing and the economic relations.
Okay, so financing is, it's stupid. ISIS has some finance because actually it's not a wonderful organization. It's because it took the place of the government. He entered Mosul, he took the place of the government. He entered different cities, he took the place of the government. So they have the money that the government of Iraq had before, which is the taxes, which is the national bank,
which the revenues,
the oil, etc. So, but if ISIS did not take if the government was still there, didn't get out of the city, ISIS have no finance. So it's joking, I'm kidding when I say that they are poor, they don't have money. There's absolutely no state today who has any benefit to give them money. Even the Gulf states has now made Qatar completely isolated because of this kind of thing. So for me, there's absolutely, and everything is traced. Even when you send €5, we know that you sent €5. So it's today for me the finance is almost something that is just for us to make something, but they are poor, they don't have the money, they can't have the money, and if they have the money, they need the people who become Muslims to make these attacks. So it's for me non-topic. For me, finance is a non-topic today.
Nuno. Muito bem. Já vamos a uma próxima questão que há fora de Lisboa, no Porto, mas Nuno Lemos Pires, esta questão para se houver algo a acrescentar, esta questão do financiamento e, ao mesmo tempo, uma questão que foi colocada aqui sobre, tendo em conta o conhecimento que hoje já há disponível, se é necessário melhorar a estratégia e a questão que estava relacionada com isso, com a necessidade de desenvolver também políticas educativas que possam levar a uma melhor integração social destes grupos.
I will start to answer in English because I want to rebuff your argument. And yes, I don't agree with you. And the reason is very simple, because terrorism and assassination is not the same thing. And if we mix the things like trying to treat terrorism as a criminal activity in the country, we are doing a very wrong attitude. Because it's completely different to kill someone for money, or to kill someone because I want a car, or to kill people and let me be killed in name of something.
We agree on that.
Okay, if we agree on that, we shouldn't look at the fact. And then the media effect. What I really, really, really regret is not the way that some of the media spend 12 hours talking about someone who had a hammer to see something. What really affects me is why they spend 12 hours in European soil and 0 minutes in the same attack in Mali or in the Central Europe. That is ethics, and that is something that...
Because there's no money.
Yeah. So... Okay. Basically, I understand why people are worried. I understand that sometimes media affects and people respond to what people have some anxiety. So going back to America Latina, I will switch to Portuguese now because it will be fastest. But América Latina, é por isso que eu não comparo as duas coisas. Porque aquilo que é as guerras dos quartéis, de facto, tem a ver com o dinheiro, tem a ver com o poder, tem confirmação com o poder. Então não há uma ideologia, não há uma narrativa que seja assim apelativa. Porque isto... 1000 pessoas, no último mês, 1000 seres humanos no mundo fizeram-se explodir. 1000 não são 1000 doidos. Eu sei que as pessoas gostavam de dizer, são 1000 doidos. Não são 1000 doidos. Mesmo que haja 900 doidos, há 100 que morreram porque achavam que estavam a cumprir uma causa. Isto não é a mesma coisa que um cartel mexicano manda a matar. O cartel mexicano manda matar porque matam-lhe a família a ele. Ponto final. É intimidação, resultado, pobreza, dominação. No mês passado foram 1000 suicide bombers. 1000 no mundo inteiro, claro. Aqui na Europa foram 7. Mas foram 1000 no mundo inteiro. E esses 1000 no mundo inteiro, por exemplo, 20 no mesmo sítio. Foi no Norte do Iraque, 20 para atacarem uma zona do Kurdistão. Esses 20 temos que ir atrás da sua ideologia e fazer a tal contra-narrativa, que eu acho que sim, que é preciso fazer de uma forma muito construtiva. E acho que temos que identificar que há problemas em todo o lado. Isto não há a ver uma coisa. A maldita geopolítica está sempre presente. Há sempre interesses. E são todos diferentes. Isto é um problema global, precisava de uma resposta global. Não há respostas globais porque não há governo mundial. Ponto. Cada Estado tem um interesse diferente, cada sociedade tem um interesse diferente, cada pessoa tem um interesse diferente. Portanto, a maldita geopolítica, território, recursos, pessoas, interesses, está sempre presente. Isso é estratégia. Eu faço uma matriz. E eu digo assim, há um interesse deste país. A Rússia é diferente dos Estados Unidos, a Síria é diferente do Iraque. O Sykes-Picot está lá, as fronteiras não foram resolvidas. A maldita história também está lá sempre. Mas isso não resolve o problema de base. O que é que diferencia? Por isso é que eu gosto de diferenciar. Só estamos sempre a falar da mesma coisa. É que isto não é Pol Pot. Isto não é Adolf Hitler. Isto é, de facto, uma ideologia que já existiu da mesma forma no mundo cristão, quando nós tivemos aquela intolerância depois de São Tomás de Aquino e Santo Agostinho, aquilo que foi a desvio para a Inquisição e para uma certa afirmação de um totalitarismo feito a partir de um clericado. E neste momento nós temos um revivalismo religioso nesta fase que tem que ser combatido. E eu estou perfeitamente claro, e para mim é tranquilo, que a maior parte dos muçulmanos obviamente não tem nada a ver com isto. Mas está dentro deles a solução também do problema. Com certeza que são os principais interessados porque a guerra não venha a ter com eles. Por isso eu acho que a grande parte disto é nós não queremos comparar o que não é comparável. Ou seja, é tentar... Isto é uma dimensão política, não é uma dimensão religiosa. Estamos a falar de islamismo terrorista, movimentos islamistas, estamos a falar de movimentos políticos, estamos a falar de uma ambição política, não estamos a falar de uma ambição religiosa. Isto não tem nada a ver com Alá. Isto tem a ver com tentativas de agregar forças ao longo de umas ideias, de uma coisa que não é mais do totalitarismo. Regras muito simples, estabelecidas de uma forma igual, num mundo que é dominado por alguém. Mas essa narrativa é tão forte, que tem ganhado aderência em muitos pontos do mundo. E é isso que tem que ser combatida. Mesmo que seja 1% do mundo muçulmano, mas tem ganho. É isso que nós temos que combater.
Vamos então à questão colocada pelos companheiros que estão no Porto. Força.
Muito obrigado. Eu prescindo da palavra porque acabei de ficar esclarecido nesta intervenção. Muito obrigado.
Pronto. Mais questões em alguns outros locais? Não? Aquele senhor na terceira fila tinha pedido para falar também. Não sei se está mais alguém na lista de espera. O senhor ali a meio depois.
But now my question is this. In their own religion, and we have seen in your PowerPoint, Professor Guider, on the beginning, the Sunnis and the Shiites. And what we assist to at the moment and now is the fight in their own religion between them. They don't accept one another. And now I ask you, from when comes this? Because it was these last times that we assist this question in Islam. But this is a question from them inside. And I ask you, since them disappeared in the Islam religion, because it was not only these last times that we see this. Thank you.
Okay, I answer very fast. The difference and the fight between Sunni and Shiite is really 14 centuries ago. It appeared 14 centuries ago.
Yeah.
What happened since the last decade, the last 10 years, is a new war of all against everybody. All against everybody, because this we can trace it exactly in 2003. In 2003, the last person representing what we call the nationalism, means my country first, is Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein has been overthrown in Iraq with the American invasion of Iraq.
So it was the Iraqi
It was the Iraqi that is the beginning of the revival of the war in religion inside Islam. Why is this? Because when the American entered Iraq, the Iraqi people doesn't even know that they are, for example, they weren't saying, I'm Shiite, I'm Sunni, I'm Kurd. So the American entered and they made the system, political system, the superpower, who says that Iraq is no longer Iraq. Iraq is, the north is Kurd, the center is Sunni, and the south is Shiite. By doing this, they put it in the constitution. For example, the president should be Kurd until now. The prime minister has to be Shiite until now. And the head of the parliament has to be Sunni. This is the constitution. So by doing this, they replaced the national identity, I'm Iraqi, by saying I'm Iraqi. They replaced it by a religious identity, saying I'm a Sunni Iraqi, I'm a Shiite Iraqi, and I'm a Kurdish Iraqi. By doing this, they created religious identities that have erased the national identity. But where it is strategy, it is about strategy, is that they took Iraq, they divided it by two religious identities, but the third one is not religious. Because the south, they say it's Shiite, the center is Sunni, but the north is Kurd. The Kurdish is not a religion. Kurds is not a religion, it's an ethnic. The question is, what are Kurds? What are Kurds? Kurds are Sunni. Kurds are Sunni. So if the American has said Iraq is Shiites in the south, Sunni in the middle, Sunni in the north, the Sunni will be still in power because they are the majority. They cannot change the government and change the power balances there. So this was the major shift in the Middle East. They changed the identities, the national identities. They destroyed, because it's a superpower. Because it's a millennium from divide to rule. Divide. Yeah, it was the West, I agree. We are the West, friend. We are the West. So we can say the West, but the West is also Portugal, it's also France, it's also everybody. So we are the West too, and we are allies with the United States, etc. So this was the shift that made the new identities. Everybody was saying, who am I? I am Shiite, am I Sunni? And it began to, today, everybody sees himself through eyes of religion, which is the main strong point of the Islamic movement. They are religious, but it is also, that's why I'm optimistic, it is also the main weakness. The main weakness is that all these movements are religious movements. So they cannot influence really the West. The West is beyond religion now. It has this problem. If it occurred in the 16th century, 17th, 18th maybe, it can be an impact, a world impact. But now they have, first of all, to change the people's mentality who became secular. They have to make them more religious. It's very, I mean, someone in my area, for example, if I take the area where I'm living, 100,000 people in Paris, I think, okay, I think there's really nobody will put the veil. Whatever you say, they will not, you cannot convince them to put the veil. Whatever you say, they will, maybe you can convince them to remove all their clothes, but you cannot convince them to put the veil. So the main thing is about religion. Are we going for a world who is more religious or not? I think that the West is out of religious. He's gone out of religious. So it's very difficult for this type of groups to go through it.
It's a truly interesting debate, but we are running out of time. But Nuno Lemos Pires would like to make a rebuff of this.
Well, just a short one to say, again, I don't agree. And basically to say this, 2003, 2001, come on, nothing happened really different in 2003. In 1979, it really happened a huge difference. And that's where, first of all, we have to look a little bit of history and be aware. Secularism was leading the countries in the 20th century, and all of the Muslim nations were under secular regimes after 1920-25. But all of the secularist regimes disappeared from 1920 to 2004. All of them. You have 54 Muslim countries in the world. You have 2 secular countries in the world now. All of the rest of the one have not. They have certain parts of Sharia. So this didn't happen in 2003. Yes, 2003 was a bad year. Yes, 2003 happened to worsen things. Worsened things. 2001 worsened things, yes. But it's not, blame the Americans, okay. Blame the Americans, blame the West, blame the oil, blame the money, blame the cartels. You can blame anyone. But look, 1979, you had the jihadism, communism, Khomeini from Iran. It's when you lost Persia and you started to have Iran. You had the invasion of Afghanistan by Russia. And you have the Mujahideens coming from all the world starting there. You had the Wahhabism taking the power over the Saud family, giving money to spread the Wahhabism doctrine all over the world. You had petrodollars after the taking of the mosques in 1979. When the 2 mosques were taken and the French commandos came in, you had the money that Wahhabism had to express through madrasas and mosques all around the world, giving the money to do this. So the problem really started in 1979, where you had the Hudud ordinance, where Pakistan chose to change their laws and introduce Sharia in Pakistan governance. So all of this happened in 1979, and everything grows. So when you're talking about religious differences, they weren't there. Yeah, of course they were there. They were always there. Like it was Hutus and Tutsis, like there was South and North, like you had the American Civil War. You always have ethnic differences, religious differences, but they only come up when you have something that exploits them. And it was not 2003, it was 1979, it was 1920. It was, of course, the Sykes-Picot agreement when you divided Sunnis and Shias in the different religions and created countries like Lebanon, Iraq, Syria and Lebanon.
Eu não sei se estes senhores são mais ou menos da mesma idade, mas parece haver 24 anos a separar os argumentos de um e de outro. Peço para ambos um grande aplauso e muito obrigado.